Thank you for staying with us. You're still tuned to Morning Spring on Western Spring Television. Accountability, integrity, and transparency are qualities of good leadership. When these are lacking, the people lose faith in the government, and the government resorts to the use of arithmetic or voodoo statistics to convince the people that their lives are getting better. In recent times, Nigeria has saved trillions of naira from the removal of fuel subsidy. And Mr. President made reference to that during his Independence Day speech, acknowledging the fact that Nigeria has actually saved trillions of naira as a result of the removal of fuel subsidy. And he said in his own words that these monies are meant to take care of the people. According to him, these savings have been disbursed to different arms of government, state governments, local governments, for them to take care of the people. But unfortunately, Nigerians are still grappling with poverty, increased poverty crisis, according to Nigerians. Majority of Nigerians are living below the international poverty line. So the question is, where is this money going to? All the money saved from removal of fuel subsidy? That is the big question. If the government has so much money, why is it not affecting the lives of the average Nigerian? And we talked about it here last week. But recently, the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project has urged state governors, 36 state governors in Nigeria, and the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Mr. Nyesom Wike, to urgently disclose spending details of the money saved from the removal of fuel subsidy collected from FAC, that's the Federation Account Allocation Committee. And SERAP is demanding, full disclosure of the money spent, including project implementation, completion reports, if any. And of course, they also called on the state governors to publicly invite the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, and the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, to monitor and track these monies being released to them, because that is what accountability is all about. SERAP urged them to publicly invite ICPC and EFCC for monitoring and tracking. So in a Freedom of Information Act, this is quite a lengthy letter dated 4 October 2025, signed by SERAP Deputy Director Kolawole Oluwadare. The organization said there is a legitimate public interest for governors and the FCT minister to urgently explain how they have spent the money they have so far collected from the subsidy savings. SERAP said the savings from the removal of fuel subsidy ought to be spent solely for the benefits of the poor and vulnerable Nigerians who are bearing the brunt of the removal. That's coming from SERAP right there. The FY request read in part, there is a significant risk of mismanagement or diversion of funds linked to the increased FAC allocations collected by the states and the FCT. The spending details of the money collected by several states and the FCT from fuel subsidy savings have been mostly shrouded in secrecy. Millions of poor and vulnerable Nigerians have not benefited from the trillions of naira collected by the government and FCT, the governors rather, and FCT minister as a result of removal of fuel subsidy. And of course, according to our information, the Federation Account Allocation Committee, FAC, in 2024 distributed 28.78 trillion naira from the removal of subsidy on petrol to the three tiers of government, representing a 79% increase from the previous year. And of course, state government's allocation increased to 45.5% to 5.22 trillion naira monthly. Of course, monthly distributions in 2025 reportedly exceeded 1.16 trillion naira. So much money saved, trillions of naira saved from removal of fuel subsidy. And Nigerians are asking, where are these funds going to? Thankfully, SERAP, Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, has taken it upon themselves to call on the government, governors, and FCT minister to urgently disclose details of the spending of these funds or face legal action. Joining us on the conversation this morning, we have Mr. Kolawole Oluwadare, Deputy Director of SERAP. Good morning, Mr. Oluwadare.
Good morning.
All right, thank you so much for joining us on this segment of the program. Your organization has called on the governors, to urgently disclose details of the spendings of the money saved from fuel subsidy removal. Otherwise, you would take legal action. Let me start from this point. Mr. Oluwadare, do you think, or should I put it this way, how seriously do you think the state governors and the FCT minister will take this threat of facing legal action if they do not disclose, full details of how they've spent the monies allocated to them so far from FARC allocations?
Thank you very much. It's not a threat. It's actually an exercise of the rights that we have as Nigerians under the Freedom of Information Act and the constitutional provisions of freedom of expression that allows Nigerian citizens to have access to information. And you will understand that that is needed in any kind of democracy to ensure that people participate in governance. So I see no reason why they will not take this seriously, particularly given the judgment of the Supreme Court earlier this year, saying that the Freedom of Information Act, of course, applies to states. If the states can make promises to people as part of their constitutional functions as to what they would do, provide rules and the like, health and education, then it's only logical that the states should also provide detailed breakdown of both income and expenditure. The federal government on its part has disclosed allocations through FARC to states, but what we are asking now through the Freedom of Information request is for the states to now disclose how those funds have been spent. And of course, there will be records for how they're spent. There is a procurement laws in each of the states that guides the spending. I do believe that this should be taken seriously, and I see no reason why this should not be respected, particularly given the provisions of the laws that mandate public institutions and government, and I'm referring to the Freedom of Information Act, to proactively disclose this kind of information and even provide it within 7 days upon request, which SERAP has done.
Absolutely. Mr. Oluwadare, you also asked for details of locations of projects executed. So this is quite trying to hold the government accountable for every money spent from the fuel subsidy savings allocated to governors and the FCT minister through FARC allocations. The question now is, how soon do you think you can get these details? If, of course, like you said, it's provided for, there's provision for that in the law, the Freedom of Information Act. So how soon do you think you can get your request met by these governors and the FCT minister?
The Freedom of Information Act provides for 7 days from when the request is served on public institutions. In this instance, will be the state governors. So each of the governors and the FCT minister, 7 days from when they officially receive the correspondence. And it's very important to emphasize that the Freedom of Information Act does not even make it mandatory for such requests to be written. We've just taken a step to ensure that at least we have record of proof that those requests are written and submitted. So I would expect that to be done within that time frame. I see no reason why this should be another public interest litigation on the part of state governors to allow this to go to court, and they will send their lawyers to defend this case. I think it's another waste of taxpayers' funds. It is simply a request for information, and you would think that any state government who is serious about governance or even serious about democracy will be eager to showcase what they've done with what they've collected. It's very simple, really. So I'm looking forward to getting the information as you sent the request to them. And unfortunately, if we do not get the request, we'll be compelled once again to go to court, which really it shouldn't be. It will be another public interest litigation.
Sorry to cut in, Mr. Kola, just before my colleague comes in. You said 7 days from the day they've been served. In this case, which day would that be? Have they been served? Have you served the governors and the FCT ministers? And if you have to count 7 days, yes, when will you start counting from, and when will it elapse?
Yes, the days of service will vary from state to state. I believe some states got theirs on Friday, some will get theirs today and throughout the week. Definitely before the end of this week, every state government will get the official correspondence. Again, this is not the first time we've done this. So the 7 days begin to count from when each of those state governments get the notice.
All right. Yeah. In your release, and let me quote it, you said many states reportedly owe civil servants salaries and pensions. Several states continue to borrow to pay salaries. Millions of Nigerians resident in your state, of course you are addressing it to each governor and the FCT minister, continue to be denied access to basic public services. several years of allegations of corruption and mismanagement in the spending of public funds by several states and entrenched impunity of perpetrators have undermined public trust and confidence in government at all levels. Then you went ahead to cite sections of the law, Section 15, subsection 5, in the 1999 Constitution as amended, requiring public institutions to abolish all corrupt practices, and Section 13 of the Nigerian Constitution imposing clear responsibility on public institutions, including, those states, to conform to, observe, and apply the provisions of Chapter 2 of the Constitution. Now, all of these things are there, and some will say this is not just peculiar, that these concerns for Nigerians watching and, living here in Nigeria, and maybe those watching around the world will say, this is not just about the last 2 years of the subsidy, payment discontinuance and the proceeds from the savings being spread, disbursed to the federating unit, national, subnationals, and all of those things. This has always been the practice before now, but you are saying based on those monies that the government has said they have saved and distributed to the state, show us evidence. That as they say on social media, show us evidence. We must see all of these things. But now you are doing this under the FOI Act, and some will say at best you're only seeking information, actually, and some of them might say, why should you, in what capacity are you doing this? That's number one. It's because some will say, you might just be that SERAP, maybe some interloper in these. And I like you to just explain that, because there are various state of assembly in each state that are supposed to do the oversight function, call the executive to order, show us your books. There's ICPC, there's EFCC, all of those agencies that are supposed to be doing this. Why is SERAP concerned in all of this? And you are saying after 7 days, if they wouldn't do the needful, you will go to court. That's my number 2 questions. Are you not bothered that, in fact, when you hear the word SERAP, then you hear the word court? Because you have been suing agencies, state, government at all levels. How successful have you been, all of that? And are you not deterred that in this quest of yours, maybe you have not been able to achieve much? 2 questions.
Thank you very much. It seems to be a loaded question, actually. For the basis of SERAP's request is predicated on the fact that we are Nigerian citizens, and that is the simple reason. And that is why the Freedom of Information Act is very clear. Section 1 particularly establishes the right of any person, being anyone, to have access to information. And it's very important to understand the legal framework that gave birth to the Freedom of Information Act in 2011. That is the Constitution itself, talking about the right to freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is a 2-pronged right. It is the right to receive and the right to impact. So as we are having this conversation now, and to the millions of your viewers worldwide, everybody is exercising that freedom of expression. So this freedom of expression is not limited to the governors, the president, going around the nooks and crannies of Nigeria to promise what they would do and to have people listen to them. It also means that people have the right to ask them questions, if during the electioneering or post-elections when the issue of governance is taking place. And that is why we made that request. Of course, this is not predicated on politics. It is to ensure that government is accountable to the people. And a key tenet of accountability is being transparent. It means people must have access to information. So a very good example would be that when you go to the website of the Debt Management Office, for instance, you would see the loan that Nigeria has collected. So if I include the breakdown to each state, it's not enough to know how much has come in by way of loans, for instance. We need to know how they've been spent, who got what, which road was being done, how was the process of doing the roads, when would it be completed, how much was paid for it. These are key elements of democracy, and it's very important that this is understood within the context of the kind of advocacy that we do, that this is not politically motivated, but to ensure that the government is accountable to the very people who put them in the office by their ballots. And as to whether these forms and other public interest litigation and why we do this and whether we are deterred, I think the answer is very obvious. We are simply doing this because we're a non-governmental organization registered in Nigeria that we've sworn to promote human rights and to ensure that the government, who has the key responsibility to protect and promote human rights, hold up its end of the bargain. Unfortunately, we have to use the law courts to either enforce, promote this right. But like I've mentioned earlier, we only go to court as a last resort. So you can imagine if these governors respond to this freedom of information request, we would not need to go to court. We only go to court because the law, and in this instance, Section 6 of the Constitution empowers the judiciary at all levels to be the final arbiter to determine the rights and obligations of every Nigerian, including between government and between the citizens and the government. And also, the same Freedom of Information Act allows any citizen who has been denied information to go to court to compel such a public institution to provide the information. And that is why we will go to court if we do not get that a response to the information we are requesting for. I can tell you that we have filed a lot of cases in the past. We have a lot of cases pending. And we've had some judgments that are also yet to be obeyed, as it were. But that does not deter us, because like I used to ask, what is the alternative in legal advocacy to engage government?
Mr. Kola,
nobody wants what to be the alternative.
My exact point, because you have so many cases in court that, you know, maybe it has not been adjudicated upon, then you have some judgment that are quote unquote in your favor, in the public favor, because I believe you do this for the public as well, and they have not been obeyed. So many, in fact, some will just put it up and say SERAP is doing this. Some will just flip it and say SERAP, are they not tired? This thing, actually, it looks like it's not working. You are not at quest. There are things, you know, cases or pronouncement of court against maybe the president. Are you asking him to do this and do that in the public good and all of those things? And you are here now saying you need information from different state governors, you know, about accountability and probity. As it is now, with what we have and all other things, with what we are pursuing right now, even when you have the judgment, even when you have the information, the execution of those things that you are seeking for, sometimes, possibly on a scale of 1 to 10, is a 2 or a 3. So why is that urge to keep doing this? That's number one in my follow-up question. And number two, without anybody asking for the FOI, actually, I mean, using the FOI rather to seek information, are there not standard ways of doing things from the state, from local government, from the FCT, that might be like a dashboard or a website that people can have access to without asking? They just go to it, see the debt management operation in each state, see what they are doing with the infrastructure, the money they have collected, this is how it is, these are the contractors. And they are not supposed to be standardized way of doing things in Nigeria, except of, you know, activating the FOI or going to court.
Thank you very much. As to the first part of the question, we are not deterred. And that is why I asked initially, what is the alternative to the kind of legal advocacy that we're doing? The alternative, of course, would be unlawful and it would be illegal, and that is not something we will do or encourage others to do. And that is why, again, we rely on the framework of the Constitution, which Section 6, which empowers citizens to approach the court to determine the liability and obligations of the government. When the federal government wanted to take up the issue of local government autonomy, didn't the federal government go to the Supreme Court to initiate and activate the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court against the states? So it means that even the government understands the legitimacy and the need of the judiciary. Federal government could not muzzle its way against the state as well, so you have to go to court, and that is what we do. And sometimes, unfortunately, I do agree with you, some of those judgments are not enforced, but there are other ways in which they become beneficial. Contributing to jurisprudence, encouraging people, letting people know that holding government to account is a right and a duty and an obligation. And we've had some that have also been enforced as well. So on the whole, we are going to continue to do this. And you've also asked about the proactive disclosure, which is also woven into the Freedom of Information Act. In fact, very clearly, Section 2 of that act mandates public institutions, which of course state governments fall on that, to proactively disclose information. That is called proactive disclosure. It means through websites, bulletins, gazettes. The government has the duty and the obligation to provide information, not just by way of, so which is why you see federal government publishes details of FAC allocations. It is still under that obligation to proactively disclose. But now, to trickle down to the subnationals, to the state and local governments, they now need to be more proactive. For instance, how many states has their budget now on the portal of the Ministry of Finance that people can have access to? How many people can track how much loans they get without, of course, access to the debt management office from each of the states to know how they've been spent? Do we have open procurement law portals in each of the states to assess for the citizens to see how those funds have been spent for each of the infrastructural developments taking place? The law is there, but the problem has always been it's been more observed in the breach than in positive ways, and that is why we need to continue this kind of advocacy, which I appreciate your organization for doing right now, to give voice to this so that people understand, and at the least they're able to engage with those in public institutions to demand for their rights. Before elections, during elections, and post-elections. The least people should be able to use this to engage during the electionary campaigns when the politicians do their thing, going around making promises that it would appear that they have no intention of keeping.
All right, Mr. Oluwadare, I most sincerely commend you and your organization for the great work you're doing, holding our leaders accountable. Nigerians are indeed proud of you, and of course, thank you for your resilience. It's quite important to note that you have taken it upon yourself always to hold the government accountable. That being said, Mr. Oluwadamilare, now that you've urged the state governors to give full disclosure of spending details of savings from fuel subsidy, you also said that you require about 7 days for it to be implemented. Now let's come back to Nigeria. Mr. Kola, you and I are Nigerians, and we know how things work here. So what if the governors just ignore your request? The governors and the FCT minister, what if they just ignore your request and they tell you, as usual, as they say here, you can go to court? What happens next? That is my question. What do you think will happen? Do you really see these governors and FCT minister actually taking this seriously? And if they should ignore your request, what exactly should we expect next from your organization?
Thank you very much. It's very interesting, almost paradoxical, that Nigeria is a thriving democracy where go to court becomes a dare and not actually a threat. We can see popular slogans on social media, and it's quite bad. It simply means that people are losing respect for the rule of law, and we want to attract foreign direct investment when the rule of law is quite it's looking bad. I do understand the context in which we work. And I understand the problems that the judiciary has in the administration of justice, both criminal and civil. And I also know that this affects sometimes the length, most times actually, the length of the cases. But again, the question is, what is the alternative? There is no other choice that is lawful, and that is why we continue to do this. And we've had cases in court where, again, the advocacy behind it, the conversations that people have, which is what we're doing right now, also encourages and educates people, and it brings up that more popular the pressure to ensure that those in public office exact political will to obey the law. It is quite unfortunate, I've come to find out in some of the cases we do, that these state governors will hire lawyers, sometimes for the Ministry of Justices of various states. Sometimes they even firm out the cases, that is, the subgrant to cases to private lawyers. Sometimes SANs come to defend this kind of cases, wasting taxpayers' funds, millions of naira, by the way, to defend a citizen's request for information. It's painful if this becomes one of those public interest litigations. It might well be. And it's very important that Nigerians understand this. And to frame it simply, for instance, it would mean that the governor of a state, using the Osun State as an example, would rather get the Ministry of Justice, either through the AG or to the lawyers in the Ministry of Justice, or even hire external counsel, millions of naira and man hours that cannot be calculated, to come to court, to spend 2 or 3 years defending a citizen's request for information. What does that say about such a governor, such a state? You would agree with me, that doesn't look positive. So if we do not get the response, of course we'll go to court, because the law allows us to do so. Not because we are being malicious, but simply because it is the right thing to do in this instance, rather than take any unlawful step.
Absolutely, Mr. Oluwadare. And again, as part of your request, you called on the state governors and the FCT minister to invite the ICPC and the EFCC to monitor and track these funds. My question is this: shouldn't that be the responsibility of the federal government in the first place? And here's how I mean. Mr. President acknowledged the fact that more money has been saved, more money has been disbursed to the states and local governments. Shouldn't there be a mechanism for them to monitor and track these funds? Is it just enough to release funds to these people without putting in place, ab initio, that mechanism to monitor and track these funds? Why should you have to be the ones coming now to tell them to invite ICPC and EFCC to track those funds?
I think it's very important to understand part of the reasons why we are taking this route in our legal advocacy to hold government to account. There are actually several mechanisms, I call them accountability mechanisms in our legal framework, starting with the Constitution to the various laws. The FY is just one of those laws. We have the Procurement Acts, for instance. We have constitutional provisions of Auditor General, for instance, that provide that check to ensure that funds released either from the federal to the state or from the state to local governments properly tracked and well managed. The reason we are doing this is because those options have not been effective, not because the legal framework, the laws that set them up are bad, but because they've not been implemented properly. So I'll give you an example. The Constitution provides for the Office of the Auditor General of the Federation, and that is replicated in Section 125 of the 1999 Constitution for each of the states. The Auditor General, as it were, as the name sounds, is just a simple audit. The Auditor General annually is supposed to do an audit of each of the states, while the Auditor General of the Federation does for the state. He's supposed to do an audit. An audit in simple terms, in layman terms, will just be checking how much was budgeted, how much came in by way of actual releases and environment, and how they've been spent. And the procedure followed in each of those spendings, including documents to show how they've been spent. A very good example, procurement. If the load is to be awarded, let's say it's 100 million naira, how was the bidding process conducted? Who won? What was the payment made? What's the time of completion? Those are the kind of things the Auditor General is supposed to do at the state. And the Auditor General, by the provisions of the Constitution, is supposed to produce the reports annually, which is sent to the State House Assembly, who by a resolution can call for an investigation. You can imagine if this is being done at the state annually, it will show how much has come in. It will show any malfeasance in government already. And then we will not need to go through this route to ask the EFCC and the ICPC to come in. But that doesn't mean that even at this stage, those law enforcement and anti-corruption agencies cannot come in. This is not to say that there has been corruption. And I believe this is an opportunity for those governors that they have nothing to hide. If the ICPC and the EFCC comes in, they look at the books, they check what has been provided, and if they give them a clean record, that's fine. And anybody, of course, that is found culpable will also be made to face the law. It's very simple, really. And I see no reason why anybody in public office should run away from scrutiny, unless, of course, they have something to hide.
Yeah, Mr. Dari, sorry to cut in. Do you really think the ICPC and EFCC are truly independent? Because if they are independent, they should do this job on their own. You talk about states. Of course, we have states, houses of assembly. We should be having oversight function. But when states, houses of assemblies have been, captured, so to speak, by the governors, what do you expect? They will always do the bidding of those governors. So there is no way they would, carry out their oversight functions in favor of the people. So the question is, what can we do as a nation to make EFCC and ICPC truly independent, that they can actually go after anybody without being invited, without being mandated by Mr. President to witch hunt anyone? Mr. Dara, are you still with us?
All right.
I'm afraid we lost connection there. We try to reestablish connection with Mr. Kolawole Oluwadare right there.
Yeah, we understand we must go on a break. By the way, I think we should say thank you to Mr. Oluwadare, for staying with us. And that's the Deputy Director at SERAP. And we wish him all the best. We'll go on a quick break right now. When we return, we further talk about the Project Nigeria and taking a different gear, different angle. This is your country, my country, his country, our country, and it must work. Thank you for staying with us.